we are back with our next guest, Paul, who is the founder of Mr.Prezident, an award-winning presentation agency who are based in Amsterdam, which, by the way, happens to be my favorite city. They work with clients like the UN, Nike, PwC, and many more, and utilize Prezi in a tremendous way, and not just actually Prezi. So you will see from his session what I mean by that. Hi, Paul.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you? As I mentioned already during our backstage, I love your apron.
Thanks.
So happy to have you here. Now it's up. Now it's off to you. I will be monitoring the questions and comments. So make sure you put any questions you have in the Q&A session in Hopin. I will be monitoring these for Paul, and then he will answer some. So Paul, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Paul, and 10 years ago, when I was in university, I sort of accidentally founded an agency called Mr.Prezident. And for the past 10 years, our amazing team of presentation designers, developers, and story experts have been helping people and organizations to achieve more with presentations. So I'm very excited to be here today and to share what I've learned along the way. So if you have any questions during my talk, just put them in the chat and I can answer them afterwards. So why am I in a kitchen, you might ask? Well, quite recently, the short answer is that quite recently I realized that creating a presentation and creating a meal actually involves taking the exact same steps. So that's my short answer. But I'll lead up to how I came to that conclusion in my talk, because what I'll do today is I'll share with you our secret recipe for creating successful slides that we use day in, day out in creating presentations for our clients. So what's on the menu for today? I will tell something about how to come up with an idea for a presentation, how to prepare for your presentation, how to cook up your slides, and how to present them with joy. All right, so first thing, coming up with an idea. So you might ask, why do I actually need an idea? And an idea actually has two reasons to be there in a presentation. The first reason is that ideas make stories stick. So picture this, you've created a presentation and you've presented it, and the next day, someone in your audience is asked, what was that presentation about? And if that person in your audience answers with, I have no idea, you actually failed to imprint your idea into the audience head. So that's what I'll be doing today as well. I will try to imprint my general idea into your heads as well. So if tomorrow someone asks, hey, what was Paul's presentation about? You can answer that question. And an idea helps to do that. The second reason to have an idea is because ideas make your life so much more easy. Think of it as preparing a meal, and trust me, I will come back to the meal analogy quite often during this talk. Think of it as preparing a meal, and you really want it to succeed, but your plan of approach is that you're just going to walk into the kitchen, you're going to open some cabinets, put a pan on the stove, throw in everything you can find, and just hope it will taste good. Well, that is often what people are actually doing when creating presentations. They just start without having an idea at first. So an idea makes it much easier because you know what kind of ingredients to get, and you also can formulate a plan to achieve your objective. All right, so how do you get to an idea? Well, the ideation process, I could have a separate talk on that specifically. But what I'll explain today is how to come up with an idea that is suitable for your objective and for your audience. And in doing so, we need to first answer a couple of questions. So before you even start opening up PowerPoint, answer 3 questions for yourself when creating a presentation. So what's the occasion? Who's coming? And what do I want to achieve? So what's the occasion? Well, a presentation occasion defines your idea. So this is a model that we use internally at Mr.Prezident, and it's actually a simplified version of it. So we call this our presentation ecosystem. And what you see is that in presentation occasions, a lot of people think when they hear the word presentation, they think of a stage with a presenter on it. But the majority of the presentations are actually held in meeting rooms or on one-on-ones. So it's good to define what's the occasion that you're actually going to present. Is it internally, a day-to-day presentation that you're probably going to create once and present once as well? Or is it what you see in the middle ring? Is it a presentation for a company overview or a product pitch? That kind of presentation you create once, but you present that over and over and over again. Or is it a single event that needs to grab the attention? So that could be an event, but it could also be just a single presentation that means a lot to you. So defining your occasion actually helps in defining how you're going to prepare for it. If you're just preparing to create a presentation that you'll be given once internally and that has low importance to you, you don't have to prepare it the same way as you do for your company overview or for a specific event. So we create the most presentations in the middle ring and in the outer ring, and that's what I'll talk about today as well. And I'm going to go a bit of presentationception on you today, because what I'll do is I'll explain my process of creating this actual presentation and going over the steps in order to explain how to approach creating a presentation. Hope you're still there. All right, so the occasion, what did I write down? I wrote down that I wanted to create a presentation for an online presentation event. So that's the first question that I answered. On to the next question. So who's coming? Is it a friend coming over, or are we expecting the parents-in-law? Well, what I want to illustrate here is that defining your audience is very important in coming up with an idea, because different people like different ideas, and different people have different interests. So it's important before you start designing or creating to know your audience. And again, I did the same thing for this talk, so hopefully I got it right. So my guess is that you're somewhere in Europe and that you're an international audience, that you're probably somewhere between 25 and 45, that you have a job and that it's related to presenting and that you're here on a professional notice, that you're either an inspirator, a decision maker, or an influencer, that you're eager to learn, and that you're interested in presentations, obviously. And probably in the past half year, you have eaten an avocado that was either unripe or overly ripe. Am I right? All right, I hope so. Cool, so now I have this information on my audience. I know what the occasion is. It's time to answer the most important question. So the most important question is, what's your objective? What do you want to achieve? And this seems so logical, but it's so often forgotten. So what we want to do here is we write down specifically what you want your audience to do or what you want to achieve in your talk. So spoiler alert, this is what I set out to create. What I wanted to do is create a presentation that explains to my audience how to prepare for a presentation, and I wanted to entertain you a bit as well. So hopefully I'm succeeding. So first step, write down your 3 answers. And I hear you think, all right, so now I have these answers, but how do I get to the idea? Well, that's really simple. You write them on a piece of paper, you fold it, and you put it under your pillow, and you fall asleep, and the next morning you'll wake up, and you'll have your idea. Okay, maybe that doesn't always happen, but sometimes it works that way. And that's because you already know what you want to achieve, so you can start thinking of that. And that's what happened in this specific case for me as well. So the other day when I was preparing a meal, it was in the afternoon, and when I was preparing a meal, I was going over my answers of these questions, and I thought, how can I come up with an idea that is relatable to an international audience, that is universal enough, and that teaches someone that preparation is important. And at that moment, I was actually preparing a meal, and I realized that in preparing a meal, I had done exactly the same things as I would do with creating a presentation. That afternoon, I had sat down, opened a cooking book, come up with an idea, looked for inspiration, gathered the ingredients, prepared the ingredients, and I was now actually at the point when I was starting to cook. So the idea was born. And most of all, who doesn't like food, right? So that's what I set out to do. And that's how I came up with my idea. All right, so now we have an idea. It's time to start preparation. And you understand that when creating a meal, it is important to prepare well. So today we're going to prepare 3 things. We're going to prepare the story, we're going to prepare the design, and we're going to prepare the environment that we will present in. So let's start with the story. What's the first thing you do? The first thing you do is you keep your computer switched off. And the second thing you do is you look for Post-its and you write down everything that you want to be in your presentation. Every topic, big or small, it doesn't matter. And please don't organize them yet. Just write down everything that you want in your presentation. It could be something big or it could be something small. Write it down, and once you think you're done, sit down and take 10 extra minutes, because this is where you decide what's going to be in and what's not going to be in. Okay, the next step is to organize your thoughts and to organize these topics. And what we like to do is write down the chapters that we have in mind and organize the Post-its underneath. And ideally, we create 3 levels of information. So for example, we are now in the preparation chapter. We're now in the story, which is level 2, and we're now in organizing, which is level 3. So that's the way that we organize our thoughts and organize the topics that we want to address in our presentation. So create this structure. And again, do this with Post-its, or you can use a tool we like to use. It's called Ideaflip, where you can do this virtually as well. And in this ideation process, really go over your storyline, switch it around a bit. What would happen if you would start at the end, for example? Try to work with it and try to go over the story in your head already. Now, once you've agreed on this story, the next step is my favorite part. It's where we open up the computer, we start up PowerPoint or Prezi or whatever presentation tool you would like to use. And what you're now going to do is you're going to transform the thoughts that you used, that you wrote down, and you're going to create a slide for every Post-it. So that's what we did here as well. Create a slide for every Post-it. Now, on that slide, you only write that single word or sentence that was on the Post-it. And that's the first step. So we like to call this creating a wireframe. And once we have the overall story structure, we can now look at the individual stories that we want to tell on each slide. So we have all these slides now organized, and we know what the main message per slide will be. And now we're going to zoom in on one of those specific slides. So in creating a wireframe slide, there's one really important thing and advice I have for you. Don't design. Use a white background and black text, and stay away from already designing while you should be focusing on your story and on your messaging. So if you don't do that, all of a sudden, you're switching colors, you're switching fonts. Hey, there's a tab that says animation. Hey, let's try some stuff of that as well. And what will happen is you'll start procrastinating and you lose focus on what you should be doing, which is focusing on your story. All right, so no designing yet. But what should be on the wireframe slide? Well, let's start with what shouldn't be on the wireframe slide. If you open up a PowerPoint slide, for example, there are 2 boxes, one below and one at the top. And there's a mistake that is being made very, very often, and that is that people put the things that should go below at the top. In other words, what people are doing, they put their speaker notes in the actual slide. So why is that a problem? And I like to use an analogy my colleague Maarten, who actually gave a workshop yesterday on this conference, used. He said, imagine that you're in school and your math teacher starts writing down every single word that he's telling on the chalkboard in order for you to understand what he's trying to explain. That would be a miserable experience, and I hope your high school wasn't like that. Now, what your math teacher actually did, he only wrote down what he couldn't explain verbally, and he only wrote down the most important message for you to go over and to understand. So that's what we want to do with slides as well. We only want to include what really matters for you to tell your story. And although I really like this food analogy, I really want to ask you to not write your grocery list on your actual slide. Okay, so what should be on there? On the wireframe slide, you write down everything that you need in order to explain the one message that your slide can have. So you can use text. It could be a big header or maybe an extra single line of text. Or it could be a visual, for example, a picture or a graph or a chart. But the only thing you want to add to your slide is something that actually helps to understand the message of that slide better. That's the only thing that should be on that slide. So don't go looking for images and graphs while you're creating your wireframe. Just write down what that graph or image should tell and look for that afterwards in the design process. Okay, so there's one more thing you should add to your wireframe slide. And that is something that we like to call structure indicators. So structure indicators, you see them here as well on my own slide, are elements that help the audience to understand where you are in your story. And that gives them a safe and secure feeling, and that actually helps them to interpret your story and listen to what you're saying instead of deciphering where you are. So use structure indicators, and structure indicators could be the main topics or the subtopics, but those are consistent elements that you keep using throughout your presentation for your audience to understand where they are. All right. So now, actually, what we've done is we've created an overall story, an overall storyline, and we have created all our slides on a wireframe basis. So you could say the hard part is already done. So once that's finished, we can start with the next preparation. So the next thing we want to prepare is the look and feel. And this task is really simple. The only thing you need to do is think of your idea. And I explained in the beginning that an idea was really helpful. But it's not only helpful, it's also fun. So for me, when I was looking for inspiration for this presentation, design inspiration, I just Googled a lot of examples on food. So food apps, food imagery, cooking books, all that kind of stuff, food packaging. I looked for inspiration, things that I liked visually, and I just put them on one single slide. So that's the only thing you need to do in this stage. You can just let it marinate there for a while. Okay, so we have the wireframe, we have the look and feel. The next thing and last thing we need to prepare is the environment. So this is often forgotten, and it's very important to properly prepare this. So try to visualize what your experience will be when you are giving your actual presentation. How big is the room? How many people will be there? What will be the difference? Can I walk or can't I walk there? Am I using a projector or am I using a monitor? What cables do I need to hook up my computer? Is there sound? Do I have speakers that I can use? All these things matter before you start creating your presentation because they could impact your actual design. So for example, if there isn't sound, you can't use videos. Or if it's a projector, you shouldn't use light colors or small text because they're harder to read. So you should know everything about the environment before you start creating your presentation. All right, so the preparation is done. We can now start cooking. Let me take a sip of water real quick. All right, it's time to cook up the slides. So what is the right order of throwing things into the pan? Well, what we like to do is first define the most important slides. Secondly, we're going to design those slides. And then eventually, based on those slides, we're going to create the entire deck. So let's go over these steps. We have the wireframe, but how do you decide your most important slides? Well, I'm not talking about importance on messaging, but I'm talking about importance on design. So look for slides that resemble the majority of your content. If you have a lot of big titles, look for at least one slide that has a big title. If you use a lot of graphs or images, look for those kind of slides. So that's what you want to do. Select 3 slides and maybe hide all the other slides that you have. So hide the other slides in your wireframe. So you leave 3, and we're going to design those 3 slides. So what will we be doing? Well, we're going to apply the design inspiration that we have, and we're going to apply that on the slide. So some of you might think, I have brand guidelines to follow, or I have a template that I should use professionally when I'm creating my presentation. So how can I do that? Well, actually, the presentation you're looking at right now is completely on brand with the Mr. President template and brand guidelines. But what I did, because I have that idea of food, I can now apply those brand guidelines to a new concept that I hadn't done before. So that gives way more creative freedom. So I looked for, in my design inspiration, I looked for things that were similar. So I noticed some colors in the images that I selected, some colors were there more than others. So I tried to look for those colors and use them in my presentation. I also, if you look at the visual in the middle, what I really liked was that app feeling of a food app. So I tried to implement those elements in the design of my presentation as well. And what I did as well is that I looked for the way that the images were being treated. So they're sort of polished, and I like that effect. So I applied that to our slides as well. So that resulted in my first design slide. And what I want to do now is that I want to apply those same design principles to my other 3 slides as well. And one thing that's really important, if I want to do that, is that I do that consistently. So consistency or inconsistency, what do we mean by that? Well, you might have heard about the phrase that good design is invisible. Well, if you believe that to be true, you could arguably say as well that bad design is noticeable. And noticeably bad design could become confusing. Confusement could eventually lead to frustration with your audience. And that is the last thing that we want. So consistent design, think of consistent design as teaching your audience an alphabet. Explain them what the letters do and how to use them. And do that really early on in your presentation. And once they learn the language, it's really easy for them to quickly decipher this. So we distinguish 2 types of consistency. The first thing is visual consistency. So visual consistency means that we want to treat similar elements in a similar way. An example, if you use title slides and your one title is bigger on one slide than on the other slide, what will happen is that your audience will automatically think, without even noticing it, that the second slide is less important than the first slide because the text is smaller. And at the point where they realize that's actually not the case, they need to decipher this again. So that leads to a frustrating journey. So what we want to do is we want to keep elements that should tell the same. We want to treat them visually in the same way. So that goes for text, text sizes, colors, images, shapes, labels, you name it. Everything on the slide. The second way that we look at consistency is functional consistency. So functional consistency helps to create predictability. And your audience, trust me, likes predictability. So, of course, you can surprise them every now and then, but you should do that intentionally and not unintentionally. So predictability, for example, the way that we've been using these elements here, or the way that we've used the big title slides in between, we always do that in the same way. And because we are doing that in the same way, you know what to expect, and that results in a frustration-free journey. All right, so I created that first slide, and then I've applied the same elements to slide number 2 and slide number 3 as well. And it could result in that some choices you made on the first slide actually don't work on the second or on the third. So you should keep polishing this and work layouts and text and try a bit up to the point where you feel that all 3 slides are consistent. On this, you now have worked out 3 slides, and what we now want to do is work out all the other slides in your deck as well. So what you could do is take a new slide and add sort of the rules that you created for those 3 slides and just write them down. See an example here for the actual presentation that I'm now having. And that helps to create a consistent layout throughout your entire presentation. So you define your own rules and then you apply those rules to everything in your presentation. And then you have a full laid out deck. So that brings me to the last step in the recipe. So that's serving or presenting. And we're at a conference where there are people that have a tremendous amount of knowledge on this specific topic. Our focus has always been on presentation design and creating storylines. But I do want to leave you with one tip or thought on presenting. And that is that I strongly believe that, all right, let's use the analogy one more time. I strongly believe that if you're in a restaurant and in scenario A waiter walks to your table and plates your food, throws it on the table, mumbles something and walks off. And in scenario 2, that same waiter would come to your table, put down the plate, smile at you, and be passionate about at what he's actually serving you. In the second scenario, that food would taste much better. So the same thing applies here as well. If you serve it with joy, then your audience will like it better as well. So please try to serve it with a smile. And voila, now we have our dish. Now we have created a presentation. And I really, really hope that I reached my objective and that I made sure that the next time, in a week from now, or in a month from now, or even a year from now, when you're creating a presentation, you realize that you're actually doing the same things as creating a meal. So first come up with an idea. Then prepare your story, your design, and your environment. Cook up your first 3 slides consistently and then create your entire deck. And do it in such a way that you can't wait to serve it with joy. I want to leave you with one more thing, and that is that we've actually created our recipe for this talk. And you can download the recipe at mrpresident.com, and that's mrpresident with a z.com/recipe. I hope you learned something today, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Paul, for this great cooking lesson, actually. I really enjoyed it. I think it was, for me at least, it's a great way to combine my hobby with the other thing that I like, which is presentations. So thanks a lot for thinking out of the box for us. And we did a promise in the introduction of the conference, which is that from now on, people are going to look and approach presentations in a totally different way. And I already see here in the comments and in the Q&A section that they already do. So they're like quite impressed with your setup. And there are a lot of questions as to how you did it. So I want to leave it to you to tell how you did the setup and what's behind it.
Yeah, I was afraid I would get that question. So what we've done in the past half year is that we've worked closely with a lot of our clients to look for a way to create a similar experience that you would have in a face-to-face meeting or in a real-life meeting and recreate that experience virtually. So what we wanted to do is create a way to have an environment where you can present, like you would do if you would have a face-to-face meeting, and then have your content placed into that environment. And then we actually took that one step further, because what we now can do, since it's virtually, we can blend the content in our environment and play around with that as well. So that's what we set out to create. And we're actually combining multiple tools and approaches. So I'm in front of a green screen right now. And we are using a couple of tools where we are combining that. And we are going to launch that next month. So this was sort of a beta test, and launch it next month as the virtual presentation experience.